and welcome back to another great Beerfield Fantasy episode, Beerfield Fantasy Shots episode. I am your stumbling out of the gate host, Dan Thury. Follow me on the Twitters at ThuryBFF with two Fs. Follow my wonderful co-host Chris Hopper at HopBFF with two P's. You can follow Nick Sparts on the Twitters pretty much on the show page, but he has his own personal account that he likes to do naughty things on, and that's at Nick Sparts. So we're going to jump right into the news. We've been kind of keeping along with the Zeke news with Hurricane Irma and what that's doing with the Dolphins and the Bucks game. Over the last couple hours or so, we've had all of our Zeke breaking news as well. So we're just going to jump right on into that. So kind of taking over from what Hopper talked about last night, the NFL filed a motion to dismiss Zeke's case in the U.S. District Court. Wow, sorry, things are hard to say. That happened last night, and then this afternoon, the NFL arbitrator Harold Anderson, or not this afternoon, excuse me, around 8:45, 8:30ish this evening, Harold Henderson, the NFL arbitrator, upheld Zeke's suspension. So that alone just meant he was going to have to serve his full 6-game suspension. And then 15 minutes after that, reports came out that the temporary, because they upheld his suspension before 4 p.m. Eastern time, Zeke was still eligible to play in Week 1. We're going to find out by Friday at some point if his temporary restraining order is going to be upheld, if it's going to be granted, or if it's just going to be denied. If it gets denied, Zeke will be probably serving his 6-game suspension in weeks 2 through 7. If it gets upheld or granted, it'll be they'll have to kind of get this whole thing solved while this is going on, which means Zeke can play while this is going on. Basically, think of Tom Brady when the whole Deflategate came out. This whole thing kind of played out the same way, where Brady put his suspension on hold while they were going through everything, and then he had to serve his suspension the following season. So Zeke could be going down that road. What it looks like right now is either he's going to be suspended in weeks 2 through 7, or he'll have to serve it at some point next season. The worst case scenario is that this keeps getting held out a little bit longer, but never really figured out, and then he has to serve his suspension potentially in weeks. Let's say starting in week 10, which means he has to miss the entire fantasy playoffs, which is not what we want at all. So as a Zeke owner, I know with what Chris and Nick mentioned and what you guys will be listening to on tomorrow's podcast is when do you sell Zeke if this thing doesn't get solved? Their bye week is week 5. Just remember that, which is probably a good time to really start thinking about what you're going to do with them if things haven't been mentioned. Because you drafted Zeke to play, or you drafted Zeke knowing he's going to miss the first 6 games. Now with him missing them potentially weeks 2 through 7, which means he's not back until week 5 because of that week 5 bye week. Or if he plays all year, then you're fine. In Dynasty, don't do anything. If you own Zeke in Dynasty, don't trade him. This is probably where his lowest value is at this point. I know you may be freaking out, especially if you're a win now owner. Don't trade Zeke, though. At least don't trade him for pennies on the dime or pennies on the dollar. Moving on to the other big news that happened on today. And that's Hurricane Irma potentially affecting the Bucks and Dolphins game. It's already been stated that it's not going to be played in Miami. Thank God. We're all for player safety, and we hope that all the victims can get out, or you hope that all the people can get out and get to a safe spot, and all that good stuff. The reports came out about 9 o'clock tonight from Jeremy Fowler on Twitter, saying that there's 2 potential destinations that this game can be played in. It's either Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. If that happens, just go on and rank it the same way. It's at a neutral site, so it's on level playing ground. But what we don't want, and what most people don't want, is to have them have a week 1 bye and then have them play 16 straight regular season games, because both both the Dolphins and the Bucs bye week is Week 11. So it kind of worked well for the NFL there, but no one wants to see them play 16 straight games as both of these teams are playoff fringe worthy teams. That could mean they even play longer, and that's just a lot of fucking time without any real break. So moving on, those are the two biggest news of the day. So we're gonna move on to some of the smaller stuff that happened. That's Jonathan Williams was signed to the Broncos practice squad for $510,000, which is a lot of money for practice squad signing, I may add. I expect him to be promoted sooner than later. C.J. Anderson, Jamal Charles, one of them get hurt. Boom, he gets promoted. I had mentioned on our podcast that maybe there's something wrong with Devin Booker, with Booker. I don't know why I keep saying Devin. With Booker, but he's still on track to come back sooner than later as well. Still kind of shocking to us that a guy who was considered a must-own handcuff went completely through waivers without being picked up by any team in the league. I'm still wondering if there's something in the background that is causing this to happen. Maybe he did something, maybe something with PEDs or something, and he's going to get suspended. So just keep an eye on that. As for now, if you own Jonathan Williams in any redraft leagues, drop him. If there's any drafts still going on within the next day or so, don't draft him. In terms of dynasty, I think he's droppable. He went to a team that already has a running back we love, and D'Angelo Henderson, that could maybe be the future. Dynasty, I would look to see if somebody wants to trade him, maybe try to get a draft pick for him. Otherwise, it's pretty much safe to drop Dynasty as well as redrafts. Moving on to some news that kind of surprised me because I wasn't even thinking about it. But per the Boston Globe, Robert Kraft stated he won't interfere in the 2018 QB decision. This is directly towards Tom Brady and whether or not the coaches, specifically Belichick and his staff, would want to bring back Brady next season. The team hasn't moved Garoppolo. They're asking for Keen's Rams for him. You know, with a guy who showed some promise. He played well during Brady's suspension last year, and at this point, maybe the team's ready to move on from Brady. I've always stuck to my guns in that, saying that Brady and Belichick are both gonna retire and hold hands right after the sunset, and they go make sweet love together with all their 5 fucking Super Bowl rings. So I was just a little shocked to read this. I guess I never really thought about it. You know, I thought Brady was the most untouchable player in this league, who pretty much has the most clout. He can do whatever he wants. He's basically Peyton as well when he played. So just something to keep an eye on. Obviously, this doesn't have any redraft implications. And then if you own him in Dynasty, you already know why you have him. So moving on. Purefield Yates, Tyrod Taylor has been cleared to play Week 1 and will probably be the starter, which is going to be delaying Mr. Vanilla Man himself, Nathan Peterman. I don't like this as much for Zay Jones or Jordan Matthews because Peterman's skill set fit their skill set, and Tyrod lost his best piece with Sammy Watkins being traded. They're against the Jets, so he does have his upside with his legs. I have him as a Q at back end QB2, low end streamer. I know it's against the Jets, but he's been banged up. He looked really bad in the preseason, and they took away his best option. So just kind of keep your eye on that situation. As a show, we love Zay Jones. So he is a waiver wire potential pickup, which I'll talk about in the next episode I'm doing after this. I wouldn't start Tyrod. I mean, if you really need a QB stream, maybe you have luck and you don't trust who else is on the roster. I guess I would rather look elsewhere, someone like Carson Palmer. That's my thoughts on Tyrod. Moving next to the Seahawks. The Seahawks are unsure of Thomas Rawls' Week 1 availability. Then later on this evening, it was stated that Rawls is listed as a starter on their roster with Lacey and Chris Carson kind of as co-backups. Then Procise has his third down back role. I don't know if Rawls is going to play. I believe Pete Carroll came out and said that Rawls and Procise were kind of on the same track and that Procise is a little bit more ahead than Rawls. I expect Procise to play. I'm not really sure about Rawls. If Rawls plays, he could just not be used, maybe used sparingly, and then they'll just use Lacey even more, which is why I bumped Lacey up to a low in RB2 in my week 1 rankings. I don't have Rawls ranked because I don't think he's going to play, and I think if he does play, he's not going to be that effective. I think they're going to ease him back into this, even though this is a pretty important matchup with the Packers to start the season. So just keep an eye on that. As for the season outlook of this, I do expect Rawls to start. Like I said on the podcast, which you guys listen to tomorrow when we do our last non-regular season show, is that I would rather throw my dart throw on Chris Carson because I think he's the best running back. He was the best running back in preseason for them, and I think he is their best long-term outlook. As Rawls can't stay healthy, we know what Lacey is, even though he's the biggest wild card here, and we know what Procise is. I think Carson could be that waiver wire pickup, something like Justin Forsett was a few years ago with the Ravens, and kind of help lead your team to victory. So moving on to another really fucked up backfield. Per Paul Downier, sorry if I get that wrong, buddy. Jeremy Hill is listed as the week 1 starter. The depth chart goes as follows: Jeremy Hill, Gio Bernard, and Joe Mixon. I really don't like this backfield at all, especially for week 1. The Ravens dominated defensively against #1 starters during preseason. I expect them to do the same to start out. I don't like Cincinnati's offensive line. It's been getting worse every single year. I expect it to probably be one of the worst in the league by the end of the season. So the way I rank this is Joe Mixon's my only RB3. He's a back in RB3. Gio's a high in RB4 with probably the safest floor. And then Hill is only touchdown dependent. Hill only dominates against the Browns, I guess. And the Ravens have a good front seven, at least good enough to probably hold back Jeremy Hill. So my dart throw would be Joe Mixon. He's got the highest upside, and I think he'll end up dominating outside of the 20s work, starting even this game. Gio will have his pass catching duties, which if there's a weakness for running backs against Baltimore, if there's a weakness for Baltimore against running backs, it's going to be pass catching backs, as they'll kind of give up the dink and dunk plays. And if the game gets out of hand, that would be Gio's job. So Gio's my safest play. I'm staying away from from everybody. Hill's more likely to score a touchdown. Gio's going to get you your safe floor, and Mixon's your high upside play. So moving on from that, because I don't want to even talk about this backfield anymore. If you're wondering who my dart throw is as a season line thing, it's going to be Joe Mixon. He's the best back in this backfield. Gio can't stay healthy, and Jeremy, you already know what he is. Moving on to the last piece of news is that Adam Schefter, Jeremy Curley signed a 1-year deal with the Jets. Yay, more players. They traded for Jermaine Kearse over the weekend from Seattle. They brought in Jeremy Curley. Curley, there's one note about Curley is that during San Francisco's shit show last year, he was a bright spot. There were times that he was a high-end flex play with really bad QB play. I mean, you had Colin Kaepernick going through his fiasco. Then you had I don't know who else was behind him. Blaine Gabbert. I'm not entirely sure who was behind him last year because it was that bad. I think it was Blaine Gabbert. And he flashed. He showed for them that he can do that. And he goes to a Jets situation with Josh McCown, who will probably stay healthy for a few games. And then you have worse Jared Goff and Christian Hackenberg. Again, avoid this situation. Don't draft any Jets receivers. I do expect one of them to be not a top priority waiver wire pickup, but a watch list potential pickup. Because someone from this receiving core is going to have to step up and play. Someone has to catch balls from McCown or from Hackenberg or from Joe Schmo off the street. Maybe they'll bring in Kaepernick because why the fuck not? But that's my take on that. My dart throw, if I had to pick one, would be Jeremy Curley. But I'm avoiding this shit like the plague. So that's my take on today's news. The next episode I have up for you guys that I'll be recording and posting here within the next few minutes is going to be a waiver wire type of thing to kind of go into what you guys should be expecting from us during the season is that when I record on Tuesdays and Thursdays, Tuesdays are my waiver wire days. And because we're in week 1, we don't really have waiver wire guys to pick up just yet because we haven't played any games. So we're not entirely sure. So I'm just going to kind of give you some names that maybe you want to look out for in the free agency pool after week 1. Maybe kind of give you a couple names of players that had their situations change that you can either drop or add at this point. Not a whole lot to really talk about, but I'm going to try to give you guys something. As always, you can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram at BeerfieldFF, on Facebook Beerfield Fantasy Football. Please like and subscribe. Leave us comments on YouTube. We're really trying to bring this up. We want to bring you guys as much content as quickly as possible. That's what these shots are for. And then obviously our podcast, which will go more in depth. We'll do a lot of previews and reviews of the games. We'll have a lot of cool stuff during the weeks for those shows. You can find those in all podcast type of platforms, iTunes, Google Music, wherever. We have a podcast mail order where you want to, if you want to own me, Chris, or Nick for a night or 3, we can talk about that. Slide into our DMs. Other than that, thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.